The holiday season has so many pitfalls there, and it can either be a joyous time or a very difficult time, and having a plan for how to prepare and how to get through this season is really the key. And you also have to have some backup delicious food to eat, because if your food doesn't taste good and bad food is in your plan, that's not going to work. You need to have good food.
That's Dr. Blake Shusterman, MD, a practicing nephrologist in Greenville, South Carolina, and host of the Cooking Doc on YouTube. In fact, he's everywhere, even animated. Let me know when you're ready.
All right, I'm ready to go.
Dr. Shusterman, it's great to have you on NephTalk again. How are things in the land of the Cooking Doc in South Carolina?
Everything is great here, Christopher. It's been a busy day. I am more than thrilled to have some time to talk to you.
For patients who perhaps are diabetic or also have dialysis, these can be, it can be challenging times. What are your thoughts about that?
These times are very challenging for everybody.
I know there are patients out there who are reluctant to call the host of a party, for example, a dinner, a special event, and discuss perhaps their dialysis and their eating preferences or needs. I think communication, frankly, is the key to success here, just to have a frank talk beforehand. Would you agree with that?
I think that kind of communication is very important to create a setting that is safe and inclusive for somebody who is on dialysis. And everybody wants to make sure that they can enjoy a holiday party. If people who are on dialysis or have kidney problems can kind of embrace that same thing, that same openness and inclusivity, asking other people to accommodate them, I think that's very helpful. But there are times in the holiday season and festivities where you don't want to think about your health problems at all. And you want to separate those celebrations from your dialysis or your kidney problems or your diabetes. And once you kind of open up that box and tell everybody about your conditions, you've kind of lost the distinction there between your health problems and everything else.
That is a very, very thoughtful and sensitive and frankly understanding position to take. And to that end, you also suggest that people bring their own dish to a party, something that is safe for you.
Absolutely. The worst case scenario, as you said, is that you get to the party and the host doesn't have anything for you to eat, but you've brought a fantastic dish, and so you've got something there. You can be included.
And not only that, but you will resist perhaps the temptation to dip into the snacks, the danger zone, high sodium, potassium, phosphorus, processed meats, all those bad tasty things.
Yes, that's true. That if you got something there to eat to kind of quell your hunger, then oftentimes you can steer away from those dangers.
Including alcohol, which is fun. Well, and after a glass of wine and a few laughs, suddenly those snacks, you can see them beckoning to you. Eat me, eat me.
Well, I think that once you've had a beer or two, the salty pretzels just look so much better to eat. Watching your alcohol intake and staying focused on a plan as you go to a party is very helpful for navigating these difficult situations.
What kinds of programs would you like to show to our listeners and viewers on NephTalk today that will give them some ideas and some choices in terms of what to prepare for holiday meals?
There are a couple of really nice dessert recipes on my website that would be great to share at a party. There are some ways that you can poach pears, and pears are traditionally a lower potassium fruit. You can make them taste good by poaching them in some sugar water or even bourbon or red wine, and top it with a little bit of Greek yogurt and a sprinkle of granola or something like that. That's a great one to bring to a party or to serve at home. Actually, one of my favorite recipes is a couscous with carrots that have been roasted and some cranberries. It's served with a vinaigrette and a little bit of fresh herbs. The recipe itself is just a little bit on the higher of the potassium side. If you can manage your servings and your serving size, it is really fabulous.
Let's take a look at that show right now, Dr. Shusterman. You say bring your binders. What does that mean?
I'd like to just take a second and discuss why food is so important to monitor for people who don't have kidney function who are on dialysis. Everything that you eat and everything that you drink has to be processed and used by your body. There is a lot of extra in what you take in, and all those extra nutrients, electrolytes, and fluid has to come out of your body somehow. When your kidneys aren't working, then you can have trouble where certain things can build up in the body, like potassium, extra fluid. And if we're talking about binders, these are phosphorus binders to take care of that phosphorus that you don't want to build up in your body. So a phosphorus binder is a pill that is taken when you start eating food, and it helps your body get rid of that phosphorus so you don't digest it all. And one of the biggest difficulties for people who are on dialysis and people who take these phosphorus binders, because many people take between 7 and 10 of these pills a day.
Really?
It's really incredible the amount of pills that they have to take. But remembering to bring them to a party, to an outing, keeping them in your purse, in your car, in your pocket, so you can take them when you're eating a meal or at a party is so important, because if you don't have them with you, it doesn't matter anyway.
Doctor, we're going to end the show as we go into the holiday season and beyond with your yummy recipe for chocolate bark. I'm breathing heavily. Your thought is that, yes, moderation is really the key to success in eating something as rich as the chocolate bark. Tell us about that.
So this chocolate bark is a delicious recipe. It's very easy to make at home, and it is something that you can make and bring to a party, broken up into little pieces. But the chocolate bark, it's important to know, can be high in both potassium and phosphorus because it has chocolate and it's got nuts in it. So the key is to just eat a little bit. Most of the problem when people get into trouble with high potassium and high phosphorus foods is because they eat too much of something, not always because that food itself has so much potassium or phosphorus in a little bit.
You mentioned to me that perhaps you could share a horror story of patients who got off track during the holidays.
Get ready. So the holidays are kind of a perfect storm for people to get into trouble if they're on dialysis, especially hemodialysis, where they're going to a dialysis center 3 times a week. This occurs for a lot of different reasons. One is because dialysis units often tend to switch up the schedule around the holiday time. Maybe Christmas Day is normally your dialysis day, but it gets extended to the next day or adjusted somewhat during that week because of the holiday schedule. Being the only Jewish physician in my practice here in South Carolina, I always work Christmas at the hospital. And one of the things that I've seen over the last few years is that there is always a person or two who gets into trouble. For example, we had a woman a couple of years ago who had been on dialysis about 6 months, and she was over at her daughter's house celebrating Christmas Eve, and she was sitting next to a plate full of salty nuts.
Oh, no, and they spoke to her.
I don't remember what nuts they were, but she just wasn't paying any attention, mindlessly eating these nuts. The next day, she didn't feel so well and had to come into the hospital Christmas Day, and her potassium was very, very high.
Through the roof.
Dangerously high, and she required emergent dialysis to kind of bring that down.
Wow.
The holiday season has so many pitfalls there, and it can either be a joyous time or a very difficult time, and sometimes both of those at the same time. Having a plan for how to prepare and how to get through this season is really the key. And you also have to have some backup delicious food to eat, because if your food doesn't taste good and bad food is in your plan, that's not going to work. You need to have good food.
You'll start cruising the tables, and those bad things will drag you in. And that it's going to be a long session in center or with home hemodialysis.
Dietitians at the dialysis centers have great great resources for people. Recipes they can use, tips for cutting down the sodium in their diet. Sometimes I feel that the dietitian's resources are underused. If you got a good dietitian out there and you're on dialysis, make sure you use them.
That is a great suggestion.
A dietitian would much rather talk to you about all the delicious food that you can eat rather than talking to you about making sure that you take your binders every day when you eat your meals. It's much more interesting to talk about good food. If your holidays are interrupted by unexpected illness or trips to the hospital or emergent dialysis because you got off track or something happened that your body didn't respond well to, by having a plan and maybe staying away from some of these things that you really love but that are bad for you, you can avoid these extra sicknesses and extra trips to the hospital and really enjoy the holiday season with friends and family.
Tell me, Doctor, what is the backstory behind your interest in creating the cooking doc? What was your inspiration?
The inspiration started my first day of work down here in Greenville, South Carolina. I took a job in a private practice, and on my first day, I went to a rural dialysis unit where I was given a tour by one of my new partners, and I got to the lobby of the dialysis center, and I was looking around, and in the lobby there were these two enormous machines. But these weren't the latest and greatest dialysis machines. These were actually vending machines. On the left, we had Fritos, Cheetos, potato chips, Kit Kats, Snickers. On the right, we had Mountain Dew, Orange Crush, Coca-Cola.
Ugh, it just hurts my teeth.
Here we were trying to provide this life-saving therapy for people who don't have kidneys that function properly. And here we were going around the dialysis center telling them to avoid high sodium foods, eat low sugar for their diabetes, don't drink dark sodas. And yet we were providing them with those foods right there in the lobby of that same place.
Doctor, I've got the picture. What happened to the vending machines?
Years later, the vending machines are gone. But I'll tell you, when I first raised concern about that, people looked at me like I was absolutely crazy.
Oh.
It didn't make any sense to anybody why they would even think about getting those machines out of there.
Dr. Shusterman, thank you so much for joining us on NephTalk. Great talk. I'm determined to have the best holiday possible. And on that happy note, let's segue into a little blast of chocolate. And remember, a small portion goes a long ways. Thank you, Dr. Shusterman.
Thanks, Christopher. I had a great time again, and I really appreciate the opportunity to come on.
This is NephTalk, a podcast series created with nephrologists in mind from Satellite Healthcare, a not-for-profit dialysis provider and clinical researcher with a special focus on home as the industry's home dialysis leader. I'm Christopher Springmann, and thank you for joining us.